What is up, everybody? I am here with one of the greatest closers of all time, the greatest left-handed closer of all time, and soon to be Hall of Famer, Billy Wagner. What is up, Billy?
Not much. Glad to be here, Rob.
I am not jinxing the Hall of Fame thing. I'm speaking it into existence because it has got to happen. I mean, when you're the best at anything in baseball, and I think it's inarguable that you're the greatest left-handed closer of all time, there has to be a place for you in Cooperstown. Like that is, I mean, you're on the Mount Rushmore of closers. It just makes sense.
I hope the doors open up. It's, it's not easy to get in. And so, having this waiting is hopefully going to be worth it.
It's interesting because pretty much nothing about your career, I mean, I've gone back through your history and nothing about your whole life has been all that easy. And maybe this is perfect because the perfect symbol of kind of who you are, that it's just not that easy. I mean, one of the shorter players to be as dominant as you were, you grew up as a righty, you threw lefty famously. Do you feel that? Do you feel like somehow like this is meant to be, like you've worked your whole life for that?
You know what? No, I don't know if I feel that way. I feel that that when I was playing, it was, every game meant something. Every game I ever played in, it wasn't one particular game. It was every game because of where I came from. And so, and the road to get there and how raw I actually was to participate in as a pitcher. I mean, the only thing I knew about pitching was get the guy out at the plate. There was no lessons. There was no, and so everything that I learned was through competing and wanting to win. And like anything else, the more reps and a couple good coaches to kind of give you that right word. And that put me on the path. But no, I mean, I played football. I mean, everything I did led me to this, but it was through an awkward way.
It really was. And I think some of the stuff, like even looking at your mechanics, they're unique. You had a very, very short arm action. And looking back on it, is that something that you were taught? Did you figure it out through football? Did you figure it out just through long toss? How did you figure that out?
I don't know if it's even that difficult, that technical. I don't know if it was something like I figured out. It was just timing. Everything we do as a hitter and a pitcher is timing. And so syncing yourself to what works. And then, short arm, obviously I felt like came from the football background. And so being a quarterback and being able to throw the football, in that Dan Marino mindset, that was sort of how I learned to pitch. And, it just kind of came as I'm obviously through more football than I did baseball growing up. And that just led to having that. And I think grip strength and everything through that football, just the reps and everything. Cause there was a point where, I'm not able to make the adjustments and I'm not able to high school, college, man, it was a lot of pitches being thrown to be able to replicate and just, continuously to be, I guess, consistent, because it would be everywhere. I could be everywhere at any moment.
Do you think that short arm action gave you an advantage? Like, I know it gives you an advantage through repeatability and efficiency, and that's something that we found even through modern pitchers. You see a lot of guys shortening their arm action, but it's also the feeling as a hitter that, wait a second, this doesn't look like it's going to be all that fat, and it's zoom right on you.
Well, and deception is a big thing. I think deception in pitching and hiding the ball, that ball stayed behind my head for a long time. And when I rotated and opened up, being short, it was on you. And so your reaction was a little different than, the guys that had the long flowing mechanics where they had the long arm and they, looked like the Iron Mike and everything like that. It was a little different.
Well, help me through. While we're talking about mechanics, describe what your thought process was through your mechanics, both lower half and upper half. And maybe there wasn't, maybe you would just throw the crap out of the ball, but I'm just curious how you thought of it as one of the elite hard throwers of all time.
Well, I think at the beginning was definitely throw the crap out of the ball. It was, I mean, it was really with the mindset of don't get so technical and try to be so perfect that, you're trying to hit spots. I threw for an area. And so I cut the plate in half. Uh, even Sandy Koufax made fun of me about, he would give me a hard time because I pitched on the wrong side of the rubber. And, but it was something that was comfortable. I knew no different. And so I could, I pitched predominantly inside. And so it was just, my window was really short. I didn't have a lot of room for error. But that probably made it a little bit easier for me to do it because that was my comfort zone. But as I got more with Gary Lucas in the A ball, Charlie Taylor in AA, and then I got into Brent Strom in AAA, and in the big leagues, the more I continuously throw, the more I evolved as a pitcher, understanding the how to sync my legs to my arm and stuff. It was never a question of how hard to throw. It was just how consistent could I replicate the mechanics consistently. And that came, through just playing catch, being frustrated with everybody when I was in pro ball early was like, he walks too many people, he does this. And so, bullpens became a lot more strategic for me. And then the other thing I started doing was I was pitching for you to hit the ball. I literally was like, I would watch a guy warm up, I'd watch him get the box, I'd watch where he wanted the ball, and I'd try to throw it right there. And just the reps of throwing strikes and confidence, that it just led to the consistency of that delivery.
That is really interesting. The fact that you were throwing where you thought the hitter actually wanted to swing, and it was basically you versus the hitter, mano y mano. He can't catch up to my stuff, or he can't beat me because my stuff is that good. Where a lot of pitchers, I think, are pitching away from the hitter's strength. You're trying to get the hitter to swing because you don't think that he's going to be able to beat you. Is that what you're saying?
I want to get ahead. Most guys, the hardest thing to hit's a fastball, and so you're trying to hit a round ball with a round bat. And so now you go out there and you can't do more early in the count. And so I'm trying to get early count contact. And so, when you throw hard, one of two things happen. If you throw a ball, you're overthrowing, you're trying to do too much. And if you throw it by the guy, you just got good stuff. And so honestly, I became a better pitcher in my last couple years than I were when I was younger and had just stuff. But I didn't have a breaking ball earlier, and I didn't have consistency in that. And so being able to go out there and pitch, learning, that was the whole combination. When I got in minor leagues, I was going to throw more breaking balls and off speed than I was fastballs. The problem was I was just more efficient with the fastball, and I kept getting better with it. And so it was a fine line. They would put percentages on me about when to throw breaking balls, how I needed to throw 10% change ups. It didn't evolve that way. I just had a lively arm, and it was very hard to mature with that. I wasn't mature enough to really make that connection until I got older, and really things slowed down physically, but I was still strong enough, and you start getting that man strength around 30. And so you start being able to just replicate a lot more of what you're doing. And that's what I noticed. I was probably, I could replicate and do more from 30 to 40 than I could from the 20s to the 30s.
You mentioned something about Brent Strom coaching you. What did you learn? Because he's one of the all-time great pitching coaches. He knows more about mechanics than probably anybody, and I don't think gets enough credit for what he's done for pitchers in the modern game. What was the big thing that he helped you with or taught you, or what did you take from him?
Well, I think Rick Peterson and Brent Strom are huge with me learning how to replicate my mechanics. And that was closed eye drills, starting to feel instead of see. And once I could feel it, then I could do it. I remember the very first spring training. I actually was in instructional league when I first met Brent Strom, and he took me out to the six pack, and he goes, "Hey, we're going to do this drill where you close your eyes and throw to." Holy God, I don't think it was everywhere. I don't even think I got near the catcher. It was off, and I was frustrated, so I couldn't make adjustments, so it was useless. And then I remember in '06, I went to the Mets. Rick Peterson was there, and he was telling me stories about Hudson and Moeller and Zito and the competitions they'd have with their eyes closed. And I was like, and so I started to buy in a little bit more. And so my bullpens would be with my eyes closed and learning to feel what I was doing. And so now my adjustments became so much quicker. And then but Brandon showed me that, but I wasn't ready for that. And then when I was ready for then, you can see probably through my strike percentages, and it probably started a little bit in Philadelphia, but once I got to New York, the walks to strikeouts became very noticeable. That out 3-1, and so, but it did take some time. But Brent was huge with setting that path, and then when I talk to Brent now, we talk about and laugh because it was just terrible. But I'd never been. I was so raw to the game that I couldn't make that adjustment. All my high school pitchers throw with their eyes closed. I make them have to do this because the feel has to be there as well as understanding the mechanics to get there.
So coaching high school, is it tough for somebody who is as good as you were at pitching to coach folks, or do you get a joy out of helping somebody that no matter where they are, like helping them improve? What is it that attracts you to coaching, passing the game down? What is it that makes you want to coach?
Well, I like watching other people have success through hard work. It is the hardest thing to coach because everybody wants a quick fix. Everybody wants to throw 100. Everybody wants to do these things, but they don't realize what's entailed. And so, that's where your injuries come from. They do so much so early that they're not understanding what the real goal is. And a lot of this is maturity. They'll get to this through this a certain path, but I mean, as successful as I've been, I still have kids that sit there and really, well, they'll get on to me. They'll go, well, this guy on the internet tells me that this is, I'm like, yeah, that guy, I would listen to him because, you can't fight that. But I have a lot of kids that sit there and, day one, when they walk into Miller School and they're a pitcher. All right, we're going to get on the mound. We're going to start doing closed eyes. We're going to start doing towel drills. We start mechanical. We start doing separation drills. We start doing a lot of these drills. And that's when they feel like it's, oh, okay, now I'm getting it. But, it's always that group that's from like 14 to 16. If they're not throwing 90 and haven't been committed, that they're like, oh my God, he doesn't know what he's talking about, and it's really, the heart of the game is harder to do that because of the numbers and stuff like that. But the joy that I get is just watching the kid who does go out there and find his way and learns how to compete. And I mean, every kid that comes is a shortstop, of course, and they played center field, but once you find out and you go, okay, you're going to be a PO, I think people start to focus in, because I've had guys that I went to Virginia Tech. I get Jacob Exum comes to mind, and I mean, he is a freshman there this year, and he had been a shortstop. But when he was a freshman sophomore, he didn't throw as hard, but he hit better. And as he evolved and got bigger, he was a low 90 guy with a hammer slider and couldn't hit, and so it kind of evolved that way. So you give them that leeway to figure it out too.
Do you think there is an advantage to having played shortstop or football or other sports or other positions that brings an athleticism to pitching? I mean, how important is that?
Oh, I think what other sports do is keeps you athletic and competitive. The one thing that I see when kids don't play multiple sports is they're so consumed that they forget that you're competing. and then you get to, but there is that fine line, and I argue this all the time that, as much as I think you should be multi athlete, the problem is you can't do a 7-on-7. You can't go to a basketball clinic and play summer baseball and expect that you're going to be Deion Sanders, Bo Jackson. And so it's a very fine line. And so, when you got these guys, but I think when you're trying to figure your way, multiple sports that give you that base of grit and urgency, because a football player lifts completely different than a baseball player. Every football player that's come in and said, I'm going to be a baseball player, gets in the weight room and he's like, oh, let's put 12 plates on it. Hey, let's bench, let's bulk lift. And then when you teach them how to lift like a baseball player, their urgency and their lift, their push, their competitive, that is different. A lot of times when you have just a baseball guy who comes in that's never been pushed around and had to understand that, it takes a little bit longer to get down to push.
Interesting. So you as far as lifting in your career, like one thing going back through old video, your lower half is ridiculously strong. I mean, you're looking at your legs, they are almost like superhero looking. Is that something that you intentionally worked on? And what type of lifting did you do? Or was that just natural? Do you always have strong legs?
It was a natural. I mean, it was very natural until I got into probably college. And I started, playing football and stuff like that. But I couldn't have, I don't know, the push playing football made it more. And they taught me how to use my backside. But, when I was in high school, I couldn't lift a lick. That gun bar would strangle me. I mean, I couldn't do much. I had a deformed disc in my lower back that was hereditary, and it just, so I couldn't do anything through growing. And then once I got to college and I kind of hit that growth spurt, and I went from 5'5", 135 pounds to 5'8", 5'9", and 5'10" to 170, 80 pounds in college in a year. All of a sudden, things completely change. I'm throwing 78, 82 in high school, and now college changes everything. You get in there and you get in a weight room that's completely complex with grown men. So I didn't really get into that lifting until then. But now we've started our program at Miller made a big jump when we put in a strength and conditioning where it's more of not the football side, but we do things on a football side to a point just because our school doesn't have football. So we do a few things that kind of lifts that I guarantee you anything. Most people be going, well, you'd never do that as a baseball player, but you do those things when you're in high school. You do these things because if you're a multi-sport athlete, you are going to do bench. You are going to do these things where as a baseball player, you might be dumbbell. It might be more dumbbell, but you do a lot more stuff with them. But the weights made a big difference for me. And I would lift with Gene Coleman, and he set up our programs. We do a lot through that in pro ball. And then that led me through into help guide me through the rest of my career into the high school realm too.
One of the interesting things is that weightlifting for pitchers is almost a newer thing, and it coincides with pitchers throwing a little bit harder. Going back, Seaver was one of the first guys, but then Nolan Ryan took it to another level. And there is some connection with you and Nolan. I know Nolan said at one point you were the fastest thrower that he had seen, at least in an active baseball, which is a pretty big compliment. Is Nolan one of those guys that you looked up to at all growing up?
Well, I did about everything Nolan did. I mean, that was, Gene Coleman was his trainer with Houston and coming up, and they were good friends. But when I was growing up, you saw Tom House. He played catch with a football. He did, those are things, the old school. That was the old school. And I mean, when you talk to Nolan about, and I mean, I'll tell you a funny story about Nolan was first time, I guess it's 96, and I had struggled. I was going through a phase where, everybody started to panic because I'd give up a hit or give up runs a little more often. And it was just, like my second year in pro ball. And so they thought the world was ending. And so Larry Durker made me go down to Alvin, Texas and work during the season with Nolan. Sent me down there in the morning. We had a game that night. Sent me down there in the morning. And so, first of all, Nolan's everybody's, looks up to him. And so you're playing catch with Nolan Ryan and you're just in awe. And he's got a catcher there catch me. And, I don't have a big league ego. So I'm not down there trying to ease it up. And I'm not doing this 45-minute workout. And so I'm like, I get out of the truck, I'm, put my cleats on. We talk. He goes, I get on there and let's see what you got. And I mean, I bet you I'm throwing 100 miles an hour right then. I mean, it never took me long to get loose. It took me less than 7 pitches to be at full tilt. I was always just that mindset. And so I threw in front of Nolan. Nolan calls Larry Durden, goes, ain't nothing wrong with him. That night, I go back out and pitch. I punch out the side. I give up a run or something like that, but I punch out the side, and like the world was like, oh, he's good. Everything's fine. Nolan said he was good. But yeah, I mean, having a Nolan Ryan and a Sandy Koufax and Randy Johnson, guys like that to kind of lean on and talk up to. I mean, watching those guys made it a little easier to understand stuff too.
So interestingly, having pitched with Randy Johnson, you guys throw very, very different. Obviously, you have to. You're what, a foot shorter than Randy, something like that.
Exactly.
If you mushed him down, maybe y'all are stretched you out, you'd be kind of similar.
Yeah.
But you have different attributes. Like you have that strength in your lower half, the explosiveness, where Randy could use his kind of ridiculously long limbs and stuff. What did you take from watching Randy? What did he take from watching you? And how did that help you develop?
In a lot of ways, we were very similar how we attacked hitters. So that automatically made us kind of, look at each other. Plus, we threw hard. Our strides were very similar. My stride to his stride was very similar. I mean, we were within, an inch or two of having the same stride length. The difference is he had about a 3 foot longer arm than I did. But, having that mindset, I mean, we attacked it. I mean, when he came to Houston, we sat and talked about how I attacked hitters, and he, and that was really the first time to have a real lefty that was a power guy to sit there and go, oh, this is what. And so having that conversation, talking about breaking balls, things like that, that was that was something that I hadn't had ever. And so everybody in our bullpen, for the most part, was, if you're right-handed, it was different because you're right-handed. If you're a lefty, you were more of a specialist. And so you weren't in that realm. And so Randy just gave me the opportunity to see what I look like from a different standpoint, and seeing him live and watching him compete, I would have never sit there and go, well, I'm a foot shorter. I didn't see that like everybody else like to say, but I mean, when we competed, it was the same and stuff.
And I think that's one of the things, watching old Randy Johnson games, you can see it on his face sometimes, how competitive he was. He wanted to just destroy the hitter. And was that your mindset too? Was it basically, I know you said you pitched to contact early.
With the idea of contact.
With the idea of contact. But in the end, do you view the strikeout as, I mean, obviously you're one of the great strikeout pitchers of all time. Was that a goal in your head? Like, I defeated this guy. Like, what does strikeouts mean to you?
Well, the uniqueness of being a closer is you can be selfish. And so a selfish role, you could come in there and you could go out there and pitch for a strikeout. And there was a point where you had to give in, but you didn't have to worry about the things that a starting pitcher did. You could go out there hard. You went as hard as you could for as long as you could, where a starter would he was trying to work his way through 6-7 minutes. When I went out there, setting the tone was by the first pitch. And I mean, if you make a good strike or a guy swings a miss or something, a lot of times that set the tone on that batter and the next two. And you felt, but I mean, when I got to 2 strikes, if it's 0-2, 1-2, 2-2, I mean, it was, I'm going to strike you out. This is what I do. I mean, but that was the mindset, and that was that selfish mindset, because it was like, if I strike you out, you don't get on, we win. And that was that mindset. But the strikeout for me was a bigger difference, just because that's what I did. I mean, it wasn't something I set out to go, well, I'm just going to strike everybody out. It was just something that I was gifted to do, and my fastball looked different and stuff to other people, and it allowed me to do that.
One thing that I was thinking is, you'd mentioned the difference between a starter's mindset and a closer's mindset. Having a great closer, though, to me, and maybe you can fact check me on this based on your experience, makes the starting pitcher better, because the starting pitcher then could go a little bit harder too, because he knows that he's handing the ball off to somebody who is going to shut the other team down. You having a lockdown closer impacts every other pitcher that comes out, both on the bullpen, but also the starter, and letting them kind of go balls to the wall and compete against hitters, versus saying, I've got to stretch myself out over 9 innings because I don't trust my bullpen. Did you find that?
I think there's a comfort in having a back end that is shut down. I mean, there's nothing better than having the Marianos, the Hoffmans, the Smiths, the Suitors, those guys, because it allows that starting pitcher to go out there, and if he does get in trouble and he does get deep in the game, he has somebody that can come in and do it, be dominant enough to get you out of that mess. And I think how the game evolved was that starter, back in the day when the starters were throwing, 25 complete games a year, was different, because they weren't throwing 100 pitches. They were probably throwing closer to 150, even more. And so there was a big difference. Now with how we control pitch count, if that pitcher gets into that 112 range or 115, now he's in that 7th inning, maybe. Now you have the setup man, but it allows everybody to have that role of comfort, because now that 7th inning guy, that pitcher gets the 8th inning and 9th inning guy, they're mostly shut down guys. The only difference that the 9th inning guy closer has is there's no fall net. There's no helpline out there. You're the last guy, and that's the only thing. And when you have the guy who can do that, it definitely puts you at ease, because you may lose a game here, you lose a game there, but for 85-90% of the time, you're winning those games. And so I think it does give a comfort. I mean, you go out, and I think Doug Drabeck was the best. I think early in my career, I gave up a home run. I think I came in for him in the 8th inning, got out the inning, went out for the 9th and threw 2 pitches, and it was back-to-back home runs. And he met me at the top step to say, hey, I want you here tomorrow. Those are the things that kind of, when you hear that from that starter, that starts to give you that confidence. And so, losing and that, the home run is just part of that epic of being a closer, because you're going to give up the epic home runs. You're in that situation, and the more you run out there, you're going to give up a big hit in the 5th inning is different than the big hit in the 9th inning. And everybody likes to say that it's really, but in the 9th, you're at the end of the game. And so the starter gets a little leeway, but I mean, when that starter knows at the end of the game they can go and they've got a bullpen, you see a different starter.
Yeah, I think it doesn't get enough credit, because everybody looks at the innings pitched, not the innings that you've impacted as a lockdown closer, and how important that is to a game. So that's a very interesting point. The other interesting thing I found, and you had a quote, which is one of my favorite mindsets. The fear of failure drove you more than trying to get this success or whatever, money, whatever it is. And I think most successful people, everybody wants that pot of gold, that easy fix, that, the get rich quick scheme. But it's that doesn't drive people. I think to me, it was always the fear of losing, or the fear of being nothing, or the fear of not making the most out of whatever, that is the ultimate driver. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, I'd always had that fear of failure, because you want to feel like you belong. You want to feel like you're one of the guys and you're good. But I think Doug Eckersley said it the best when he said fear of failure drove him. And when he said that, I was like, oh my God, that's exactly how I feel. Because you know, I knew I could win. It was that fear. I wanted to win so much that that fear of losing, would just drive me because I didn't want to give in. I didn't want to be, I would be hard headed. Vinny Castillo, it just took me deep back to back nights. I was, because it was just, I'm better than you. I'm better than you. But that fear of not getting it done was very difficult. And so, I mean, that's where that anxiety, and a lot of guys take that anxiety. I remember Craig Kimbrel when he first came up in Atlanta, and I was kind of just talking to, and we're in Philadelphia, and he's going to make his very first debut. He comes in, and he's throwing, and his very first pitch of the game is like a 50-foot fastball, and he ends up going out and punching out the side. But I remember after the game, I go, "Were you nervous?" And he goes, "No, I wasn't nervous." And I'm like, "How are you not nervous? How do you not pitch with that? I don't want to fail." I know he was good, but I've watched Smoltz and guys, and how they all of a sudden things change a little bit when, it's a different ball game. I know Mariano may not have, they all had that little, man, I don't want to screw this up right here. Everybody does, but when you don't, it amazes me. When I listen to a guy go, "Yeah, I wasn't nervous. It wasn't a big deal." I'm like, you have not failed enough to understand what that means then. Because for me, I felt that, going through my whole life story, it would have been waiting on the other shoe to fall. And so that's when I stepped on the mound. That's what I was pitching like, oh, I can't have that happen tonight. So.
You touched on Craig Kimbrel, and I think that's a really interesting thing, because one of my memories was you sitting in the stands early on one of Craig Kimbrel's outing, not making any, like, you're just a fan watching him. And another thing I don't think is appreciated enough is the fact that you handed the game down to another one of the all-time great closers, Craig Kimbrel. What impact, like, how did you help him? I know one is mindset. What other things helped you? And did you feel an extra obligation because you saw what he could be and that you wanted to hand the game down and get the most out of his ability?
Well, when I became a closer, Johnny Franco was huge with me talking, but Xavier Hernandez was a big guy for me with the Astros, because Todd Jones and John Hudak, they weren't going to be friends of mine, because that was their job. And so they weren't giving me pointers. It wasn't that kind of thing. But I'd had Xavier had been a closer before, and he talked me through a lot of things, but how he approached me made me want to be that way with other guys. And so when Brad Lidge and Dotel came there, I never worried about them taking my job, because my job was going to be taken if I didn't do my job. And so I was never worried about that. But when you get a guy who's talented, it's never about their stuff. It's never about their stuff. It's about, that 1 week out of the year that you go out there and you have 2 blown saves, or you just have a bad series, or because that's when all of a sudden you're gonna have self-doubt, and every closer that has any longevity goes through that point where you have that questionable, can I do this? And no matter, I've read newspaper articles about Mariano when he's had a bad week, and went out to San Diego and heard about Trevor. We've all been through it, but that is the difference. And that was the one thing when I talked to Craig, I said, it's not going to be about your stuff. I said, for a while, nobody's going to even know how to handle your stuff. It's so electric. You're just crazy. I said, but there'll be a time where rubber will meet the road, and maybe strikeouts aren't as defined as they were, or you give up a few more hits, and there's going to be somebody that's going to walk in there and go, you're not throwing as hard as you used to, or you're not as dominant as you used to, where you are. But it's just, how do you handle those little mindsets? And that, for me, that's the one thing I wanted to tell him, is that, the belief in what you're doing day to day, and trusting it day to day. Because when you're in that you're young in the 20s and stuff like that, nothing hurts. You feel good. Going out every day and pitching, wonderful. But then when you get in there, and really when the grind starts in that 30, and you're going to get in that numbers range where possibly Hall of Famer, and people start to talk about you being one of the best, that's when the mindset of going out every day, going out there and going out there with less than spectacular stuff and doing it and getting it done. And I mean, instead of striking out 3 guys, you might strike out 1 guy and get a pop up and a ground out, and being able to go, that's fine. That's good. That's my job, and still understanding that role. And that was something I wanted to tell him. And, at the time he was just electric. I mean, him walking out of nobody was touching that. And so, and he's went through that range. He's going to get to 400 saves this year, and he's going to, be awesome. But he's had that moment of truth of where does this sit? Because I've gotten hurt a little bit. I've not been as dominant, but where do I get back to that?
I think that's another thing that people miss out on a lot. We all look at mechanics. We all look at lifting. We don't look as much at the mental game. And I know as a closer, it's huge, but as a baseball player in general, it's huge. What was some of your mindset cues before you went out there in a big game? Did you have any routines, or was it more just, hey, I'm going to forget about everything?
Well, it's routine. Everything a pitcher does is routine driven. I think, from how you get to the field, you go through the BP, how the game starts, sitting in the dugout for a couple innings, going to get your arm rubbed down and stretched out, taking that extra shower, just mentally listen to music, something just download, and then coming down to the bullpen in the 5th and 6th inning, starting to watch, pay attention to the lineups and how it's being flipped and where you might be fitting in. It's all schedule based. And I mean, and so for me, I mean, that was my big thing. I kept finding comfort in going, okay, all this is good. Now I go to a lineup and I'm walking down there in the 6th inning. I check out the lineup, and, of course the score is going to dictate, oh, well, we're down by 2, we're up by 1, whatever. But then you start going, well, if this guy's pitch counts here, he's going to come out. And so now you got Lidge will probably do this. Taglia's going to do this. You start to kind of wear it down, and then you just play that hit game the whole time and stuff. But I would have anxieties of that at times, and before every game, I would throw up. I would have that, and I would be so frustrated about that then it would be, and I think that was part of that whole. I could get ready in no time and be ready. And it was that also, I hated a manager to play the whole head game of like, hey, well, you walk this guy and give me no wiggle room. I literally would have guys, the coaches going, telling the guys, hey, he's ready. Just because that I would rather have, if I come in and if I don't feel comfortable with that hitter and I walk him, I'm not upset. But if you go out there and all of a sudden you got to face, and it's happened. They bring you in bases loaded and you're facing a Brian Giles. And I mean, or Jason Kendall. And I mean, that stands out because I came in one time and it was like, oh God, in PNC Park. And next thing you know, I think I threw a slider and hit Kendall in the foot. Now it's bases loaded. And Brian Giles comes up and he hits a home run. And I mean, it happens that quick where, not having wiggle room, it's difficult at times. And so figuring that out too is tough.
That's one of the underrated things, I think, too. And I totally agree with you. And obviously I should, because you're, again, one of the all-time great closers, but putting a pitcher behind the 8 ball and not, like, as a fan, you're sitting there going, well, a pitcher should be able to get this guy out. Let's walk the bases loaded and do this. You want to know that you can compete and you're not having to be so fine that you can't have a little leeway of, walking someone and then K'ing the next guy. And I think
it's like it's a play. It's also like going into a game to get an inning. If you go in with the game on the line, the hitter's got a little urgency to him because he's got to get going. He don't want to get behind the count. He's got to start. And if the pitcher throws a strike, sets the tone. Where if you come in there and you're getting an inning in and you've got and you're losing or winning by 4 or 5 runs, let me tell you, the hitter does not approach you, does not even concern himself, because your stuff is not as meaningful and as it would be in the other side. So I remember hearing guys, closers don't really like to be in these roles because it's, they usually don't throw the ball well. It's not that we don't throw the ball well. The hitter doesn't have there's no worry, there's no concern from that hitter, because you know what? The game's not on the line. Where the game's on the line and the anxiety starts to pump up and the fans are getting a little bit louder, it's a different. And so, it is kind of unique to hear that, but there is a big difference in those big moments, and then the ones where all of a sudden your ERA jumps because you give up a run in a 3 or 4 run game. You're not even, you're losing.
Yeah. See, I think I love analytics. I think analytics really important. It should be a tool that you use to help a pitcher, but there's points where the analytics don't tell the full story. And this is one of them. When you walk somebody, all of a sudden now, you come in with the bases loaded. The hitter now has other opportunities to get that run in. Walking, they may work the at bat differently. Whereas if you come in with no one on base, they may be trying, hey, it's me versus you. I'm going to try to go yard here. So you're at it's a whole different attitude.
And it's weird in the 8th inning too. And it's weird in the 8th inning because if a closer's brought in the 8th inning, the anxiety of the hitter is still there, and so you can do some stuff in that. And so where I mean, there's these roles you come in and man on third base and less than 2 outs, and you go out there and give up a ground ball to the second baseman. That run scores. It's a blown save. Everybody views that completely different. You roll back out there in the 9th inning and punch out the side, and bottom of the 9th, you got to score a run and you win, and you're like, well, you blew the save. How do you feel about that? And you're like, what? How am I? There is, because the hitters can change in the innings, where when it's 1-on-1 or and stuff. I remember in LA, Juan Pierre, I'd come in and Juan Pierre had just was giving me a fit. And he ended up, I think I walked him. He got to first, and then I got a guy out. I think I got 2 guys out, and then here comes Jeff Kent. And Jeff Kent was on fire. He was super hot. And Juan Pierre had stole second, and Nomar Garcia-Parra was on deck. And I remember walking out going, hey, we're walking, Kent. We're walking. And I just put the winning run on base. And I'm like, hey, right here. And I'm like, I remember facing Nomar. I strike Nomar out. I come off, and Willie Randolph's ready to choke me out because he's like, what are you doing? Why would you put? But it's a comfort level to what, hey, I'm winning, lose is my job. I'm going to win it this way. I'm going to lose it this way. And so, sometimes it's not graceful and it's not pretty, but it's just how it goes. And so having that mindset of taking those days or having that moment where it's not as pretty, but getting it done is really a lot to for that reliever closer to think about too.
So you've gone through a lot of hitters. Who was the toughest hitter in your mind that you had to face, and why were they so tough?
Say that again.
Who was the toughest hitter?
I think the toughest hitters were. I don't want to say the real hitters, but the Juan Pierres. I'd say David Eckstein, guys who weren't trying to take you deep, but were working a count and making you work. And those are the tough guys. I give up plenty of home runs to home run hitters, but I never feared the Bonds or those guys because, man, they've done hit 600 home runs. Lord, one more. There's nothing there. The hardest guy to get out, and it made it easier, is if the Ecksteins or the Juan Pierres were found off balls, and now you're at 15 pitches, you got 1 out, and this guy, you're going wore out. Now you get the Bonds and the Williams and the guy. But I always felt like the Joe McEwings, the guys who weren't trying to do a lot were the hardest. I never worried about Tony Gwynn. Tony Gwynn was going to get a hit regardless. I threw the ball right down the middle. I said, here you go. I wasn't worried about him taking me deep. It was good hitters would get themselves out. And so understanding that, but it was tough with the guys that weren't given a lot of recognition. Those are the guys that were always the toughest. They were the grinders. They weren't the one pop sensation. They were working. And David Eckstein, actually, we were in Philadelphia, and he hit a home run off of me and landed in the first row of the seats and things like that. But but those are the guys that are really tough for me.
And partly because, if you walk Pierre, he gives you no wiggle room. You walk him, he's on second. You never know what's going to happen. Like those guys not only could wear you down and see a lot of pitches, but they also could be trouble on the base paths as well.
Well, I mean, and and Juan was just like that. I mean, he could hit a shoot. I mean, he could affect the game in so many ways, but just getting on base, stealing the base, stealing second, stealing third. I mean, hell, stealing home. I mean, you had the game changed there for you, and then now you got this guy running around, and you've got a bigger hitter behind him. I mean, you had to hold a runner and make a pitch, and I mean, and you could do all those things and it still not work out. And so, though, that's to me was what made those guys so difficult. I'll be honest with you. I would much rather when they came up and I'm looking down. Okay, yeah, I've got 3, 4, 5. Yep, okay, got this. Just because I knew what they were looking at and looking for. Where you go out there and I mean, it's like now you face Judge, Stanton, and stuff like that. Those would be easier for me, mindset wise. Not that it's easy, but the mindset of knowing what they're capable of makes it a little easier to pitch to that than a guy, because if Judge gets a single, I'm all right. But if most time I'm looking to do damage, I'm going to do the damage and not him. Where when you've got your prototypical leadoff guys, then it's a different game.
How tough was it to face someone like Bonds, though? Like, I mean, knowing how good, number one, as a player, as a pitcher, as an elite guy back then, what did everybody think about him as a hitter? And, what was your, I mean, I know you said I would try to just throw the ball down the middle. Did you get a little extra adrenaline, though? Maybe pump it up a little bit?
Oh, there was nothing better than facing Barry. Me and Barry had gotten to be friends. And so you have that little inner competition. And I mean, what was awesome was just we had conversations. It seemed like we were always in places where we had chances to sit down and talk, and we've gotten to know each other through All-Star games. And me and his kid, and me and him and his son and my son would go over to the All-Star games like hours and hours early, and they'd be out playing. We'd be sitting and talking, and we just got to know each other. And so when we would face each other, it was like a brother thing where like, hey, I've got bragging rights. And so I remember, I really got on the whole baseball scene when I struck him and Matt Williams out on 6 pitches in the Astrodome with the bases loaded to win the game. And then I'd face him a couple more times and struck him out. And so, but there was time where we started. He knew it. There was nothing. I wasn't going to trick him. And he would stand there in the box, and I would throw a slider, and he would put his hand over his nose like it stunk. He would tell me, he goes, "You got the worst breaking ball in the world." He goes, "Everybody knows it's coming." And it would be awesome because, I wasn't offended. I was like, I agree. And so, but he was mano a mano. I remember striking him out in Houston, and it's the board said 102, and we win the game. I come in and he calls me on the phone, and he's like wearing me out about, he goes, "You better not be throwing anything under 102 to anybody else." And I go, "Barry, you're the best hitter I've ever faced. Why am I throwing my best to not the best?" I said, "I'm going to give you the best. You beat me, and stuff." And it was just such a good competition. He was by far the best hitter I've ever faced. And it was not just because, but you watch the whole game, you watch his whole career. He could do things that other guys couldn't. Griffey could do those things, but Barry just had a swagger about him, and you knew that. And it didn't matter what the situation, the lights came on for him when me and him faced each other. There was never a time where we faced each other and it didn't matter.
It's one of the best things. And people on the outside look at Barry Bonds and go, "Oh, he's cocky, blah, blah, blah." He was, I love the trash talk aspect of it. Smoltz made some comment where I think Bonds before the game said, "I'm going to take you deep twice," and did during the game. Like, he is, it's as a competitor, that's what you want, right?
Well, it's not personal. It's not a, I like that ribbing and stuff. I tell you right now, Nolan hated that I would talk to the other team, hated it, but it was more like that bragging right thing. I never, if somebody was kind of chirping at me, and then you read the story of Michael Jordan finding ways to like get himself up to dominate somebody. Let me tell you something. There was nothing better than having that discussion and somebody talking like that, and stuff. I'm sorry.
Oh, no problem.
but was, there was nothing better than having somebody kind of to have that look at you. I mean, and I mean, there were some guys that, you couldn't get out. It didn't matter what you did, but you enjoyed that battle. And so I enjoyed the battle against those guys. And I didn't mind. I remember Barry hollering at me one time. I was always one of the guys first out of the dugout. I love watching the other team take BP. And so I'm sitting out there, and Barry starts chirping at me, telling me I need to pay homage to his, to the older crew, to the veterans and stuff like that. And, and I looked at him, I said, well, the older guys need to get a hit off them before I start respecting them. And so it was just, a give and take. And, he didn't get all bent out. It was just hey, this is what I bring, and I don't hide anything. And we competed so well. We had great talks. I mean, it was great to face, the Jeters. I mean, to me, Jeter was a different type of just great hitter. He wasn't a guy who was just going to take you deep, but he was a true hitter. He was a true hitter, like Gwynn and like Boggs and Molitor and Yount and guys like that. They were, even Helton. Helton was a guy who could do multiple things. They were tough guys, but the guys who, and Barry was in that, but you weren't worried about the singles from Barry. You didn't want to be on Sports Center. And so that, being able to go against Barry and those guys, that was a great competition.
Did they ever give you any insight into your pitching? Like what made you so hard to hit?
No, a lot of my teammates told me how easy it was to hit off of me. I mean, that's what I remember Delgado and those guys always telling me that they could tell when I was throwing a breaking ball, when I was throwing a fastball. And, I remember guys were always going, oh, you tipped your pitches all the time. And, and I'm like, well, geez, it wasn't that difficult. It's like 50-50. I said, you really just had to know the count to know what I was going to throw. It wasn't like, it was like, oh, he might throw me a changeup here. So there was, I think there's variations. I think some guys would sit there and, like David Wright was really good about going, hey, it just looks like the ball, just jumps and stays on the plane, and, you swing under it, because guys will go, when you face Wagner, you need to swing about 2 inches over the ball and stuff. And it was just getting used to that. And, yeah, not a whole lot. I mean, I wasn't a secret. There wasn't, it wasn't like you're going out there facing Smoltz, who could throw 8 pitches and do stuff. And to me, he was going to be the greatest closer ever. If he wanted to be the greatest, he would have been the greatest.
Yeah, because he's a different type of competitor too.
Ooh.
Like that dude, man, like exactly. I mean, that was what he lived his life for. He still seems to like he's just ultra competitive.
And I love that. I mean, I love when he went into the closing role, because, man, I remember sitting in Chicago talking to him, and, he's a veteran. He's won World Series games. He's done everything. And so you're like, wow, this guy's just incredible. And now he gets out there and sitting in the bullpen, and, you get to see the nerves a little bit. You get to kind of see but it was different. It was, but I love watching how he competed. I mean, his stuff was so electric. I love watching him pitch when he's a starter. So watching all that in a 1 inning, you got 1 inning to face that monster. Good luck, go get him. And I'll tell you right now, facing Mariano, facing Hoffman, facing myself, and all those guys, we were nothing compared to John Smoltz. John Smoltz had 4 or 5 pitches, and that dude could do it all. And I mean, you couldn't sit one pitch. You couldn't do. I mean, he was phenomenal. He's what every closer really wanted to be like.
One thing that people recognize it, but you retired almost at your peak. We had talked about this earlier, how some things clicked later on in your career. Command, you were able to have better control of your body, probably able to use your slider more effectively. Your last year was outstanding, and then you just walked away. I know Sandy Koufax back in the day did kind of at the height of his career. Not a lot of players do that. It's because the money, the need to have that competitiveness, and that competition. But you did, and you could have pitched another 4 years and had your stats, even if you were about stats, you could have had your stats, through the moon. What was the thought process in walking away at your peak? And do you ever have even the tiniest second thought of it? Or is it, hey, I'm at peace with what I did because I had a great career and it was time to move on?
I've never, looked back going, man, I should have kept pitching. I haven't had that. When I stepped away, and that was the best thing, is knowing it was time. I tell you, what it looks like on TV and what the numbers say doesn't know. That's not what it feels like when you're waking up every morning. And it was a time where my kids were at a point where I wanted to be part of their life. I wanted to be in their careers and be able to guide them and stuff, because you have so much going on in these young adults' lives that I didn't want to be taking my career. My career was fine. I was fine with my career. Whatever happened happened, and so being a part of their life and allowing them to just be there, watch their little games and stuff. I'd done everything I needed to do. I'm still competitive. Um, I'm competitive, in different ways. I'm not, I don't need to feel success selfishly to feel like I'm accomplishing something. I don't. My success now and my competitive is for somebody else's success. And so I'm competitive for the other kids who I'm training or watching and stuff like that. I'm competitive with watching my kids play. And so I don't worry about, walking away. When I did, it was, it felt so right. That when I was done, I was done. I didn't need somebody. And yet, I don't think anybody has this conversation with me if I walk away and I had a 6 ERA and I'd struggled that last year. It just happened to work that way. And I mean, I think you become very, I don't think you're trustworthy when you say, I'm going to retire and then, oh, I had a great year, I'm going to come back and have another year. I think being honest, like, hey, this is why I'm retiring, and walking away. It wasn't because, I wasn't going to be successful. I mean, if I'd have retired and not done well and stuff, we wouldn't be having this conversation at all. I wouldn't even be, I'd have been off the Hall of Fame ballot and everything. But now the speculation, like, oh, you probably had 2 3 years. I don't know what I had. I know that I can still play catch and throw BP, and I still go out and throw bullpens with guys so they can see stuff, and that makes a bigger difference in their life than it does to my life.
Do you get as nervous? Like, I know the nerves from playing, that doesn't go away. Like when you're competing through someone else or watching them compete because you have so much invested, what's that like?
Well, it's now, early when I started coaching, it was very hard because, your emotions were on your sleeve and you were trying to control the uncontrollable. Now the anxiety or the excitement is watching them be successful, or when they're not, how to calm them down to get them back to that. That's, being a good coach is being able to communicate. It's not your stat line from when you play. It's how do you communicate this to these young people about making their careers the best. And so when you're doing this and you make it more about yourself or your anxiety, then you're not helping anybody. But the success they have, that I tell you, I mean, I still have the same anxiety when we watch our daughter play basketball. My two boys play baseball and my youngest play baseball. I still want them to be successful, and that's enough for me. I've never been that adrenaline junkie. I enjoy what I do and stuff, but not very big.
Yeah, I mean, having had a kid who played college baseball too, it's way more nerve wracking when you're not out. Like when you're out there, it doesn't, it's nerve wracking, but
there's no control.
Right. It's tough.
Yeah, absolutely.
So to wrap it up, like I am firmly, and I hope everybody out here will agree, you're a Hall of Famer, and
Thank you.
We're pushing you over the line this year. It is going to happen. What does that mean to young Billy? Like, was that ever a dream that you had being a kid, growing up? I
think it was a dream to be accepted, and the Hall of Fame is like the icing on the cake, where you're accepted by, the Nolan Ryans, the Bob Gibsons, the guys that were truly who you felt were great players. I think that's just an honor when you look back, and I think about it, if this was to happen, I'm standing on a stage and I look around and, there's Ozzie Smith, there's Nolan Ryan, there's the who's who of the greatest of all time, and there's the Pedro Martinez, the unit, the Glavins, who I were part of their careers. I think those are the things that I get excited about. Um, those are the accomplishments that, you're blessed to have through longevity and the teams that you played on. I mean, I couldn't have been as successful if I didn't have these teammates and these teams. But, I think as a player and individually, it's the biggest pinnacle of a athlete's life is to be rewarded at the end in that fashion.
And if you're thinking about the Mount Rushmore of closers, I don't think you can have one without you on it. So that
Well,
to
I
me,
appreciate it. I tell you, I'm a huge historian too. So I mean, when I think of the closers, and how that all evolves, I mean, there are so many guys who, I mean, that, I don't think I could pick 4 or 5 guys and go, these are the super greatest ever, because I think the argument for a closer, I mean, the Raleigh Fingers, the Gooses, the Hoyt Wilhelms, the Lee Smiths, the John Francos. I think there's so many arguments with these guys, with Mariano, and I mean, and it's not just because of the total saves; it's just the impact that they have had in every game. I mean, those are just tremendous people who've had that type of impact in people's lives in a history of a team success. I mean, you can only think of 2 closers in the Yankees organization, and I mean, and that's Goose and Mariano. And I mean, they had guys like John Wetland who had over 300 saves, and he was incredibly tough. So I mean, there's so many factors in there, but I mean, to be mentioned in that group as a closer is just probably one of those ultimate highs that you look for.
yeah, and again, the stats back it up. It's not me just talking to you. It's me looking at the all-time strikeout per 9 guy, the hardest guy to hit in Major League history. Like, those are important stats too. If you're judging somebody based on those lines, that's got to be something that works their way into the equation as well.
I think that's got to be. I think when you look in the Hall of Fame, it's got to be it's all about numbers. It's all about numbers. It's hard to, I know that guys really get on me about my playoffs and stuff, and my playoff numbers aren't good, but I keep going back to, if you're 3 for 4 in save opportunities, and you're 1-1, that you only have that much control. It's not control. I mean, I don't even know how many innings I had, and you go out there and you put yourself you give up 1 run in a 1-inning stint, you're already at 9. I mean, you just can't control those types of things like you control everything else.
Your dog's doing what my dog does. Yep. We're almost. I had one and 100% agree. I think it was 10 total innings or something like that in postseason. Like, you can't. It's a small sample size. Everybody knows statistics, knows you can't judge anything based on a small sample size. One last thing, long toss. You also had a great story, if it's true, that you used to long toss by yourself with 1 baseball and just go get it and throw it back. Like, number one, that's crazy, but it shows how much you were into the game and how focused you were on doing something. Is that true? And why was that?
Well, yes, it's true. And the reason you did that is because there's nobody else around. And I lived out in Tannersville in where there's nothing but big fields. And so, we didn't have a bucket of baseballs. You had 1 baseball, maybe 2 at best. And so, so I would go out in the field and I would just throw it as far as I could, and then I'd run and get it and throw it back as far. And that's just what you did. But, some of it's just a waste of time, but some of it, there's no way that I was thinking, well, I'm going to build my arm strength up and I'm going to do this. It was just, how far can I throw this thing, and to do that. And then you start to learn a little bit more of what that matters as you get older. I mean, long toss. I mean, Jose Mesa throwing long toss was the most incredible thing I've ever seen. I mean, he could go flat foot, foul pole to foul pole and throw it into the seats. And it was just amazing to do that. But I mean, you saw their arm strength and how that played into a role. And, and so, and then getting back into, the drive line and the tap balls and things like that. you see how that does benefit all that, and it works for some better than others and stuff. But I do think that, those, the long toss for me was the ultimate goal. And I tell guys all the time, that is my thing. That is the one thing that if I go, hey, what made you you? And that was long toss. Because I mean, you could throw that as far as you can. You can't throw tap balls as far. You just can't do certain things with that. So yeah, the long toss was instrumental to my success and how I got my arm strength.
And the other thing is it makes you have it's self-practice. No one's making you do it. You're figuring out how to organize your body by yourself. And you have feedback, which is how far the ball went. Can I beat the last throw in something? So you're automatically doing it even though no one's coaching.
Well, and that's a lot of what we deal with today is, everybody needs a teacher to tell them, hey, you're not doing it right. Where when you go out, you'll figure out what you're not doing right. I remember guys talking about arms being sore. I don't remember my arm. I mean, your bicep and tricep will get sore at times, but I don't remember ever having arm soreness where it's like, oh, guys, we're going to have to shut it down. I can't pitch today. Never, ever. I mean, not until later in my career where I had surgeries from just, yes, overuse of about 40 years that is nowadays trying to build young men and women to be major leaguers at 12, 13, 14 years old has created such an issue that we can't, we can't live up to it. Now you have the arm surgeries, now you have the injuries, and now everybody's looking for that shortcut guru move. And I mean, science does play a part, and I think it's very helpful for coaches and people who are knowledgeable about what they're doing. But when you give technology to young people who think that what I've watched is on YouTube or whatever that isn't explained correctly, or they don't understand, they put yourself in a bad situation. But long toss is one thing you can go out and do, and you figure out really quick that I'm not doing this right, or my ball flight's different and I need to do this. You can self-coach yourself easier.
Absolutely. Well, hey, it's been great. I will let you run. And again, everybody out there, Hall of Famer, I want to see you on the stage. I want to hear the speech. I'm excited for it. And we're speaking it into existence. We are not changing it. So it will happen.
Well, I appreciate it. I hope so.
Thank you so much for your time.
Hey, thanks for having me. It was great to be on the show.